Thank you for listening to the Council of Institutional Investors Voice of Corporate Governance. I'm Jeff Mahoney, General Counsel of CII. The purpose of these monthly episodes is to update CII members and the general public on significant developments in corporate governance and capital markets regulation and CII's related advocacy activities. This update covers the period from May 6th to June 3rd, 2025. The following is my top 10 list of events over that period. Number 10, on May 14th, the U.S. House of Representatives Barry Loudermilk of Georgia introduced legislation that would require institutional investors to provide detailed disclosure about how they use proxy advisors and perform economic analyses before voting contrary to corporate board recommendations. More specifically, H.R. 3402, which currently has 0 co-sponsors, would require all institutional investors who contract with proxy advisors for services to file an annual report with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission containing the following 8 categories of information. Number 1, explanation of how they voted with respect to each shareholder proposal. Number 2, the percentage of votes cast on shareholder proposals that were consistent with proxy advisor firms' recommendations for each firm retained by them. Number 3, an explanation of how they took into consideration proxy advisor firms' recommendations in making voting decisions, including the degree to which they used those recommendations in making voting decisions. Number 4, how often they voted consistent with a recommendation made by a proxy advisor firm expressed as a percentage. Number 5, how such votes are reconciled with the fiduciary duty of the institutional investment manager to vote in the best economic interests of shareholders. Number 6, how frequently votes were changed when an error occurred or due to new information from companies. Number 7, the degree to which investment professionals were involved in proxy voting decisions. And number 8, a certification that the voting decisions of the institutional investment manager were based solely on the best economic interest of the shareholders. In addition, the bill would require institutional investor asset managers with $100 billion of assets under management to provide 2 additional disclosures. 1, clarify materials provided to customers that shareholders are not required to vote on every proposal, and 2, perform an economic analysis before voting contrary to recommendations made by the board. Number 9, on May 28th, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission published 3 reports presenting 1, statistics on the state of Regulation A offering exemption over the past decade and documenting the level of offering activity and reported proceeds, as well as the characteristics of issuers and offerings relying on this exemption. 2, an analysis of offering activity in the Title III securities-based crowdfunding market between May 16th, 2016 and December 31st, 2024, during which more than 8,400 offerings initiated by more than 7,100 issuers sought a total of approximately $560 million based on the target amount. And 3, statistics describing the relationship between beneficial ownership concentration and fund outcomes for qualifying hedge funds and their advisors from 2013 to 2023, during which concentrated funds exhibited faster growth than unconcentrated funds. Number 8, on May 29th, U.S. House of Representatives Financial Services Committee Chairman French Hill of Arkansas introduced the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, legislation that would establish a federal regulatory framework governing digital asset markets in the U.S. Notably, the bill, which is co-sponsored by House Agricultural Committee Chairman G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, includes 7 provisions. 1, provides the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission with exclusive regulatory jurisdiction over digital commodity spot markets that occur on or with new CFTC-registered entities created by the bill. 2, permits an entity seeking to become a digital commodity exchange, broker, or dealer to file a statement of provisional registration with the CFTC. 3, provides the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission with jurisdiction over digital commodity activities by SEC-registered broker-dealers and national securities exchanges exempt from CFTC registration. 4, directs the SEC to revise its existing regulations to permit national securities exchanges and broker-dealers exempt from CFTC registration to operate alternative trading systems for digital commodities and permitted payment stablecoins. 5, expands the Bank Secrecy Act's definition of financial institution to include digital commodity brokers and dealers, as well as exchanges that permit direct customer access. 6, excludes digital commodities sold pursuant to an investment contract from being considered investment contracts themselves. And 7, establishes an exemption from traditional securities registration for a digital commodity issuer's offer or sale of an investment contract involving digital commodities that meets certain conditions and satisfies certain disclosure requirements. The bill is co-sponsored by House Agricultural Committee Ranking Member Angie Craig of Minnesota and Commodity Markets, Digital Assets, and Rural Development Subcommittee Chairman Dusty Johnson of South Dakota. Number 7. On May 29th, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission announced that it will hold a meeting of its Investor Advisory Committee on June 5th. The committee will host 2 panels, one engaging with beneficial owners, exploring pass-through voting and other means of reaching the ultimate beneficial owner, and 2, Beyond the Gap, market perspectives on non-GAAP financial disclosures. Yours truly was invited to participate on the second panel and plans to discuss the Council of Institutional Investors' advocacy priorities for executive compensation transparency related to requiring a non-GAAP quantitative reconciliation for pay metrics in the compensation discussion and analysis section of the proxy statement. The committee will also discuss a potential recommendation from the committee's disclosure subcommittee regarding examining the use of mandatory arbitration clauses by SEC-registered investment advisors. Number 6, on May 16th, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission announced that it will host a roundtable on June 26th to discuss executive compensation disclosure requirements with representatives from public companies and investors, as well as other experts in this field. In a related statement, SEC Chairman Paul Atkins noted that since tabular executive compensation disclosure was instituted in 1992, disclosure requirements have expanded to focus on variations of components of compensation rather than on total compensation. He added that this disclosure has become more complex and lengthy, but not necessarily more useful to investors. Chair Atkins said it's important for the Commission to engage in retrospective reviews of its rules to ensure that they continue to be cost-effective and result in disclosure of material information without an overload of immaterial information. His statement includes potential questions for the SEC staff and the general public to consider. Those questions relate to the following 3 topics. 1, executive compensation decisions, setting compensation and making investment and voting decisions. 2, executive compensation disclosure, past, present, and future. And 3, executive compensation hot topics, exploring the challenging issues. CII Executive Director Bob McCormick and CII Board Member and Co-Chair Michael McCauley, Senior Officer of the Florida State Board of Administration, are among those that have been selected to participate at the roundtable. Members of the public are also encouraged to provide their views. To file a comment electronically, use the SEC's online submission form or send an email to rule-comments@sec.gov with 4-855 included in the subject line. Number 5, on May 20th, U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Paul Atkins, in testimony before the U.S. House of Representatives Appropriations Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government, stated that the SEC is returning rulemaking to original order. Chair Atkins added, "Our comment periods will not be artificially short, and the public will have ample time to provide feedback." Chair Atkins added that the SEC will also be sure to take into consideration how rules overlap and how regulatory burdens build in keeping our obligation to consider their cost and benefits. Chair Atkins also told lawmakers that the Commission will be working with the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs on the SEC's rulemakings. Some lawmakers were extremely critical of former SEC Chair Gary Gensler for what they regarded as too many regulations coming out of the Commission at a rapid clip. Chair Atkins warned the lack of regulatory framework for cryptocurrency invites fraud. He pledged that a key priority of my chairmanship will be to develop a rational regulatory framework for crypto asset markets that establishes clear rules of the road for the issuance, custody, and trading of crypto assets while continuing to discourage bad actors from violating the law. Chair Atkins added that policymaking will be done through notice and comment rulemaking, not through regulation by enforcement. When asked about the future of the SEC's stymied climate disclosure rules, Chair Atkins noted that the various court cases challenging them were consolidated in the Eighth Circuit. He said that the Eighth Circuit posed questions to us about the SEC's future plans, and we're working on answering those. As for proposed plans to fold the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board into the SEC, Chair Atkins said whether to take that action is Congress's decision because it created the PCOB under the Dodd-Frank Act. Chair Atkins told the subcommittee that the SEC's offices and divisions have decreased their headcount by 15% since the beginning of the current fiscal year. In 2024, the agency had approximately 5,000 employees plus 2,000 contractors. He noted that today we are at approximately 4,200 employees and 1,700 contractors. Chair Atkins added that recent departures have left some vacancies that need to be filled. A day before the hearing, in her remarks at SEC Speaks, Commissioner Carolyn Crenshaw compared the Trump administration's reduction in the SEC ranks and its undoing of SEC rules and laws to a game of regulatory Jenga. She questioned, just like the game, how many blocks the SEC can pull out before everything collapses. Commissioner Crenshaw said, "Who would ultimately be the loser when the foundation gives way? I worry, as we all should, that those losing the most won't be the influential, moneyed interests. Rather, it will be the Main Street Americans, the investors and small business owners who can least afford the greatest loss." As the only Democratic-appointed commissioner remaining at the SEC, she criticized recent efforts by the commission to rescind laws without due consideration of the costs, benefits, or public feedback. Commissioner Crenshaw specifically cited staff guidance on engagement with management for purposes of Schedules 13D and 13G and rule changes affecting the rules of the road for shareholder proposals. Commissioner also challenged accusations that the SEC, under former Chair Gensler, governed crypto firms through enforcement, never laying out clear regulations for the industry to follow. She explained the real complaint was not that the commission wasn't applying the facts of the law, it was that the crypto industry didn't like the law and wanted new rules. And we've now shut down our enforcement program, abandoning our duty to enforce existing law in anticipation of creating new crypto-friendly rules. Finally, Commissioner Crenshaw raised a red flag about the risk posed by the eroding barrier between the public and the private markets. Commissioner Crenshaw noted that the private markets are inherently riskier, entail less disclosure, and require a higher tolerance for volatility and illiquidity. She said, as such, they are not designed for the average Main Street investor. Commissioner Crenshaw cautioned, what's more, it's not clear that products designed for retail investors, such as registered funds, will function effectively in times of market stress if they are significantly handcuffed to private markets. Number 4, on May 22nd, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and the U.S. Department of Justice filed a statement of interest in connection with the lawsuit brought by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and a coalition of states, alleging that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street violated antitrust laws and conspired to advance a climate change agenda at the companies by artificially restricting the coal market. The three asset managers filed a motion to dismiss the case in March. The FTC and DOJ statement says that the lawsuit, which was filed in November, alleges that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, which hold large quantities of stock in competing companies, agreed to use those shareholdings to reduce the output of U.S. coal to increase profits at the expense of American consumers and businesses. The statement adds that this case is about precisely the sort of conduct, including concerted efforts to reduce output, which have long been condemned under the antitrust laws. The statement also notes that this represents the first formal statement by the agencies in federal court on the antitrust implications of common shareholdings. The motion to dismiss says the plaintiff states have failed to plausibly allege an agreement and have not made a plausible allegation of an anti-competitive information sharing scheme. The asset manager's March 17th joint filing said this case spins a far-fetched theory. 3 asset managers conspired, without speaking with each other, to decrease coal output, which actually increased, by controlling the production decisions of coal companies, in which they each never held more than small minority stakes. Number 3. On May 21st, the U.S. Senate Banking Committee Chairman Tim Scott of South Carolina and Subcommittee on Securities, Insurance, and Investment Chairman Mike Rounds of South Dakota and Protecting Main Street Investors Working Group Chairman Bill Hagerty of Tennessee sent a letter to the CEOs of Institutional Shareholder Services and Glass Lewis. The letter demanded information about how the proxy advisor firms make their voting recommendations, the potential for conflicts of interest, and the processes used to develop and apply voting policies. Letter criticizes the proxy advisor firms for not conducting an economic analysis of shareholder proposals before issuing voting recommendations on them and for applying one-size-fits-all board diversity mandates, often issuing adverse recommendations against directors when demographic quotas are not met. Lawmakers wrote, "This has occurred regardless of industry-specific talent pipelines or company-specific circumstances, ignoring commendable, proactive efforts by individuals to recruit, promote, and maintain diverse talent." The letter also raises concerns about both proxy advisors being owned by foreign firms that publicly prioritize ESG and takes aim at ISS specifically, saying it has conflicts of interest as a result of its dual roles as a proxy advisor and governance consultant. Number 2. On June 2nd, it was reported that the Texas legislature passed a bill that would require proxy advisors that provide research and reports about companies headquartered in Texas or incorporated there to provide proxy advisor services solely in the best financial interests of the shareholders of a company based on quantitative, impartial standards for the sole purpose of maximizing financial return and controlling associated levels of risk. The bill SB 2337 stipulates that if advisors provide advice based on ESG and DEI factors, social credit, or sustainability scores, or membership in an organization that bases its assessment of a company's value on non-financial factors, the proxy advisor must provide 4 categories of disclosures. 1. A statement that service is not being provided solely in the financial interest of the company's shareholders because it is based wholly or partly on one or more non-financial factors. 2. A brief explanation of the basis of the proxy advisor's advice and recommendation. 3. A copy of the report to the company that is the subject of the service. And 4. A statement on the advisor's website that its services include advice and recommendations that are not based solely on the financial interest of shareholders. Furthermore, proxy advisors would be required under the bill to provide similar disclosures to their clients, companies, and the Texas Attorney General whenever they offer different advice to different clients that have not expressly requested services for a non-financial purpose. The bill also mandates that proxy advisors decide and disclose which of the differing recommendations was in the financial interests of shareholders. Legislation would also create a private right of action for companies and shareholders to challenge advisors for failure to comply with the rule. Texas Governor Glenn Abbott has until June 22nd to sign the legislation into law. CII staff actively assisted interested CII members in providing their views on the bill to select members of the Texas legislature. And my number 1 most significant development in U.S. corporate governance, capital market regulation for the period from May 6th to June 3rd occurred during a May 20th markup of the U.S. House of Representatives Financial Services Committee, when the committee approved a bill requiring multi-class companies to provide clearer, more detailed information to investors about how unequal voting structures impact the rights of shareholders. The bill, H.R. 3357, titled the Enhancing Multi-Class Share Disclosures Act, which CII has strongly endorsed and Representative Gregory Meeks of New York has long sponsored, would require companies with multi-class stock structures to disclose information about the voting power of each person who is a director nominee, or executive officer of a company, or who directly or indirectly holds 5% or more of the total combined voting power of all classes of securities entitled to vote in the election of directors. Although some multi-class companies voluntarily provide this information in their beneficial ownership tables, many do not. In commenting on H.R. 3357, Representative Meeks said, "When control is concentrated in the hands of a few, investors deserve to know." And Ranking Minority Member Maxine Waters of California said, The bill ensures that investors have the clearest information available to make decisions for themselves. Ranking Member Waters also pledged to work with Representative Meeks, Committee Chairman French Hill of Arkansas, to add to the legislative language consistent with CII membership-approved policies requiring companies with multi-class shares to supplement their final vote results with tallies by class. Chairman Hill praised the bill for taking a balanced approach and being responsive to comments submitted to the SEC by market participants. CII had sent a letter to Chairman Hill and Ranking Member Waters on May 19th, urging them to support the measure. The letter provided background information about why the bill is needed and noted that legislation with provisions identical to H.R. 3357 were approved in the last Congress by the House of Representatives in a 347-30 vote. That completes my monthly U.S. corporate governance and capital markets update. If you have any questions regarding any of the issues discussed, please feel free to email me at Jeff, Jeff, at CII.org. Until next time, I'm Jeff Mahoney. Thanks again for listening to the Voice of Corporate Governance.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Voice of Corporate Governance, brought to you by the Council of Institutional Investors. The Voice of Corporate Governance is a free, non-sponsored podcast that highlights critical developments in corporate governance and other important issues affecting institutional investors. The views expressed by those interviewed on the podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of CII or its members. For more information on CII and its policies on corporate governance, please visit our website at www.cii.org.